The Last Breath by Sam Kahiga. We watched Eva walking firmly back to her dormitory. I glanced sideways at Dad. He was watching her with a strange tense look in his eye. I hesitate on the word tense, doubtful as to whether Dad was ever tense in his life. But the look in his eye was very strange as he watched her walk away. I wondered what he was thinking. Whatever it was, it made no difference. I loved Eva and would marry her as soon as I possibly could. Suddenly, without a word, Dad started the engine and drove furiously down the road towards the gate of the blind school. "What will you do? You can't marry her like that," he shouted above the roar of the engine. I looked at him swiftly. His eyes were steady on the road. Anger flooded through me. So the visit had been in vain. So he had seen nothing of the inner Eva. "We've gone through all this before," I said. "Now you have seen her, my last word on the subject is this. When I come of age next August, I am going to ask Eva to marry me." "But she is blind." I sank back in my seat. This was hopeless. For how long would Dad keep beating home the fact? As if it wasn't home already, and what was more, accepted. "Then give her eyes." My voice was hoarse with anger. A look of surprise momentarily came to Dad's face. Then he looked grim. Though he didn't seem to realize it, he increased his speed. I thought I knew what had got hold of Dad, and the thought brought a faint smile onto my lips. Dad was confused and angry with himself for it. He had until now thought of Eva as a blind, helpless creature who had stolen my heart. Now he had seen her, and perhaps caught a glimpse of the angel in her, and had even seen perhaps how very far from helpless Eva was. "What are you going to do?" I asked in a shout, for now the mad roar of the car would have drowned anything less. Dad didn't reply. A terrible cough shook his frame, and the car swerved dangerously to the edge of the road. He corrected this, just in time too, and settled comfortably in his seat. Neither of us talked again till we got back home. I left the car silently and entered the house. I went to my room and sank onto my bed with a sigh. I wondered bitterly when my father would start to understand me and my feelings. It seemed to me that our ideas had always clashed ever since I had been a kid. There seemed little in my past life that I could heartily thank him for. Time and again he had interfered with my plans. Only a year before he had ruined a plan I had to study music. Thus I had ended up in a bank and was likely to remain there for a long time. That he always meant well I never doubted, but I was equally sure I knew what was best for me. Dad would make no more decisions for me. I loved Eva and would marry her in the near future and take care of her. Mother entered the room cautiously and interrupted my rather impassioned line of thought. "Well, how did it go?" she asked in a good attempt to sound light-hearted. But I could tell she was very serious, deep inside. Mother understood me. She had met Eva some weeks back and had liked her very much, although she hoped I would change my mind about it all. Marriage, that is. She understood my feelings and never tried to argue me out of it. "He met her," I said heavily. "It made little difference to him." I paused to consider this. "At least, he is still very stubborn, but I'll show him I have a mind of my own." I finished a little savagely. "Yes, but be careful." Mother looked alarmed. He looked so dark and troubled. "What does he say, Mother?" I pleaded, suddenly seized by a wave of feeling and passion. "Why don't you say you understand? Of course I wish Eva could see, but just because she can't, through no fault of her own, it shouldn't make Dad regard her as an outcast." She says I have brought sunshine into her life. Think of that, mother. If I left her, I'd plunge her back into darkness. For some reason, I was near to sobbing. And she has brought sunshine into my life too, I continued bitterly. Of all people, she seems to understand me best. Silence followed this outburst. I couldn't bring myself to look at mother in case there were tears already in my eyes. But her eyes, I knew, were fixed on my face. We all understand you, mother said at last, but we do not want you to be unhappy. What empty words! I could not even reply. My happiness was in Eva's hand. They were denying me that hand for marriage, thus plunging me into the depths of misery. Your father cares more for your happiness than you know, mother went on. Do not forget that. He looked so dark and troubled when you came in. It is bad for his health. Something in her voice made me turn and look at her. Her hand was on the doorknob, and its movements were nervous, I thought. But what struck me most was the urgent, pleading look that had come into her eyes. Your father is a sick man, she said in a voice that chilled my heart. I'll have to tell you this now. You are not a child any more. Your father is very sick. Sick? I stammered. Our eyes held. Hers were wide and staring. She leaned forward. Her voice was almost frightening as she said in a hoarse whisper, Your father has got lung cancer. You are old enough to be told. You have heard him cough, so be careful what you do. She turned and left the room, leaving me stunned, not quite comprehending. June passed away, and with it most of the sunshine. Most of the time the weather was bleak and the sky dark and grey, and a dark shadow lay on our home. Sunshine seemed forever gone from my mother. The grass was wet on a July afternoon, as Eva and I sat on a block of stone near the school. She seemed excited, as though she had something to tell me. I also had lots to tell her. I felt for the ring to make sure it was still there. She looked at me, as if she could see through her dark glasses. She lay a little tender hand on my knee. You look sad, she said. How pretty she was. She had a smooth oval face and a dimpled little cheek. I often wondered what colour her eyes would have been without the whiteness of her opaque cornea. Sad? I said with a smile. But you can't see me. Yes, but I can feel you are sad, she said. What's wrong? Please tell me. My voice was serious as I said, Dad is worse. We saw him again yesterday and I checked myself. The doctor didn't look happy. I know Dad hasn't much of a chance. Eva sat very still. I looked at her and felt happy. As always, she understood. She turned away her face. How terrible, she said. How could I ever leave this angel? To me she was perfect. I wanted her as she was. Dad, forgive me, I thought as I took out the ring, looked at it for a while thoughtfully. A wry smile came on my face. Wasn't life queer? Things turn out so very different from the way we picture them in our childish dreams. A shiny diamond ring, the girl's shy eyes looking up at me as I slipped it on to her finger. That had been my dream. I took her hand and slipped the cheap copper ring onto her finger. 1 or 2 imitation jewels gleamed. It didn't look too bad. Her surprised face looked up. What is this? She asked breathlessly. A ring, I said. You don't know? You and I are getting married. My voice was calm, but there was a lump of excitement in my throat. With her other hand she felt the ring. Suddenly she pulled it off and put it on my knee. No, she said. Let's wait a while. Her voice was shaking and low, almost to a breathless whisper. Wait, I asked. For what? A slow smile lit up her face, and she looked up to the sky. I had never seen her looking like this, happy and bright as an angel. Eva, I said, holding her hand to replace the ring. I don't want to wait. I need you now. What do you want us to wait for? Till I can see the ring, she said. I want to see the ring. I stared at her. It was chilly, but I felt sweat on my neck. What do you mean? I asked. I saw a tear creep down her cheek, underneath her dark glasses. That's what I wanted to tell you, she said. I've got my bags packed. Packed? I didn't quite see. Yes, she said. I'm going to the hospital to receive a new cornea from someone else. Someone who is about to cross over. I stared at her. I licked my lips. You mean that someone has... She nodded. I have no idea who it is, she said, but God bless him. I don't know why he should want to do this for me, but I'm going to see again. God bless him. I just stared. I couldn't find any words to say. My heart was beating hard and loud with unspeakable joy, but sorrow was equally great. July passed away, and a grey great blanket seemed to have been lifted back to let the sun smile again. It was August, and life was once more brisk and lively. I walked down the garden path, whistling to myself. The oranges for which I was aiming with my basket looked beautiful and yellow in the sun. Suddenly I stopped, the smile dying on my face. I stood still. Then I walked towards the mound of earth a little way off. I stood there looking at the grave. I swallowed hard. He was seeing me. I knew he was. I must say thanks, I said with a sudden burst of feeling. You always had a kind heart, and you really showed that with your last breath. Each time she looks at me with those beautiful eyes. I broke off. How stupid to stand talking to a mute grave. It was like talking to oneself. There was no time to waste on a fine morning like this, especially with Eva and Mother back in the house waiting for the oranges.